Well, welcome. Eureka! You have found the Cal Discoveries Travel Lecture Series on our website, and it's a delight to be with you virtually today. I'm Nancy McNeil, Assistant Director for Cal Discoveries Travel. I have something new for this interview with Professor Alex Saragoza. We will be discussing some of the aspects of our Eureka programs. Well, you may be asking yourself, what is a Eureka program? Simply put, Eureka is the brand of trips operated by Cal Discoveries Travel, oftentimes in conjunction with a lecture with specialized knowledge about a specific area. Itineraries offer unique, distinct, handcrafted experiences designed by UC Berkeley travel professionals specifically for Cal Discoveries travelers. I'd like to introduce Professor Alex Saragoza. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, whoever is listening to this particular production.
Do you want to please introduce yourself and tell us some things that I know that we'd like to know?
Okay. Well, I'll make it short since we only have a short time and I don't want to keep people online here for a long time. I'm used to teaching classes that go for an hour and a half, sometimes longer. So I'll keep this to 1 minute, so to speak. I started teaching here at Berkeley in 1980, came first as a visiting professor and then subsequently stayed and just retired a couple of years ago, but I keep teaching at the campus. I'm teaching, in fact, a course right now on the California wine industry, where we discuss, among other things, the competition that the California wine industry faces from various parts of the world, including Europe, and including, of course, in particular, France and Italy. Italy has been the major importer of wine to the United States for decades. Recently, it's lost its #1 position, but it's coming right back apparently as we speak. And France, in terms of value of wine imports, is #1 on that particular scale. So I try to craft the course in such a way that takes into account the particular histories of the countries that we're discussing. So with that, I should say I'm a historian by training. My focus is Mexico and Cuba, but when you talk about those two countries and their histories, inevitably this summons a great deal of attention to Europe on the one hand, and it also summons a great deal of attention to US history. So I had the pleasure of teaching a course on world history with colleagues from the campus. So at this point, I bring a lot of international aspects to whatever I teach, whether it's California wine industry or whether I'm teaching a course on, say, the history of Cuba.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that introduction. We're so happy to have you with us. And I think I did hear some optimism, at least in the wine industry.
Well, yeah, so, it's affecting though. This the pandemic has affected labor supply on the one hand, and on the other hand, the weather and this sort of thing recently compounded by the problems of the fires has affected a lot of vineyards in the Napa-Sonoma area, and some vintners have already made the decision not to harvest their grapes because of the taint, if you will, that the smoke gives the grapes, and therefore would probably give it to the taste of the wine. So that's a little tidbit for today on that score.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, before we get into talking more about the Eureka trips, I thought it might be interesting for our viewers to know what your association has been with Cal and or the Cal Alumni Association.
Well, my association directly with the travel program goes back to 2008. When I led a group to Cuba, and then subsequently I took a group to Cuba, to Oaxaca in Mexico, and ever since then, it seems every year I'm doing a trip in one way or the other for Cal Discoveries. So that's how far back I go on the travel side. In terms of my association with Alumni Association directly, I've been to so many talks and so on involving the Alumni Association. It probably started in 1981, right after I got here. So I have a long and loving relationship with the Alumni Association.
Oh, thank you so much for all of your support. We really, really appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit now about kind of the nuts and bolts of a Eureka trip. How and why do you and the Cal Discoveries travel team choose your specific Eureka trip destinations? Because you've been on a couple now. It's kind of
Well,
interesting how these come about.
well, usually, well, it's complicated because it depends where. Just very quick example. In the case of going to Cuba, for example, the Cuban government is completely in charge of regulating the tour operators, where you're going to go on the island, and so on. So in this sense, the Cuban government then plays a major role in shaping the initial itinerary of a trip. And then there's a negotiation that takes place. That negotiation might lead to a change. For example, I always try to emphasize a particular place in Cuba by the name of Trinidad, which at one point was the richest source of sugar in the world at a particular moment in time in the middle of the 19th century. So there's a give and take. Now, on the other hand, say a trip to Sicily, which is projected for 2021, there again, an outline is proposed. I go over it. The tour operator, in this case, Iberian Wine Tours, has an excellent sommelier that usually accompanies the group. Her name is Jenny Sedal. And Jenny and I have worked several times together. I, in fact, visited her when she was living in Spain. And we discuss what would be good places to take into account on the trip, given the nature and focus of the trip. And that's where that back and forth, it goes back to the folks here on the campus and the tour operator, and that leads to the final itinerary, if you will. So it's a give and take. It depends in part on where we're going, when we're going, but that generally is the outline of how and why we choose the destination and then the specific places we're going to visit when we go to a particular country or area of a country. And this next one coming up will be Sicily.
Great. Thanks for giving us that example of how a Eureka trip is crafted to be unique, one of a kind, and can only find with Cal Discoveries Travel. So that was an excellent example. Thank you. And moving on, so how did you help to handcraft the experiences for the trip?
Well, a lot of it has to do with my own philosophy, if you will, regarding my role on these trips. I can't emphasize enough how I try to go beyond the guidebooks. One of the things I immediately learned in doing these trips is the intelligence of the people who go on these trips. Many, if not in many cases, the majority are graduates of UC Berkeley. They're well-read, they're fairly sophisticated. Many of them have traveled to different parts of the world, etc. So given that, they are almost always the kind of folks that will buy a guidebook to that particular region or country before the trip, etc. So I try to go beyond what is likely to appear on the various guidebooks from the various publishers and really dig deep, if you will, in such a way to bring something distinctive, something usually not even mentioned in guidebooks, and to the extent they are mentioned, very briefly. And in that sense, to deepen the experience and the knowledge of the people who are going on the trip. In that regard, I emphasize usually the connection between history and the present. I always discuss heritage and culture and the persistence of that, but also the changes that have taken place and how those changes impact on this transition from what had been, say, the culture of the past to the culture of the contemporary period, and who is involved, etc. And my philosophy in this respect then is to provide the people who go on these trips through Cal Discoveries is something, as you mentioned very briefly earlier, something unique. Because too often I have found, because I myself have been a tourist, is that the speakers and so on pretty much stick to a script that attends to the obvious, if you will. So if you go to Paris, you're going to go to Notre Dame, you're going to go to the Eiffel Tower, etc., as opposed to a distinct area within the city that has a particular historical background that most people don't know anything about. And this is a case in Sicily. So already I have started to do research in that regard. And one of the places that I will mention on the trip, and this is a preview, I suppose, for those folks who might be interested, is there's a castle on the northwest side of Mount Etna, and it's called Castello di Nelson. Di Nelson, yes, as in Admiral Nelson of the famous Battle of Trafalgar. And allows me then to tell that story and the relationship between Sicily and England in the times of the Napoleonic Wars, and how, and it also leads to a juicy story, if you pardon the expression, involving Admiral Nelson and the wife of the ambassador to Britain, to the court of the King of Naples, King Ferdinand. And I'll leave that to the people's imagination. But what I want to mention is, as a kind of safety measure for the naval ships in the Bay of Naples and so on, Nelson stationed a number of sailors on the island of Sicily. And those sailors began to partake of a particular wine. We call it Marsala. And in that respect, that British influence meant that Marsala, and Nelson apparently was an enthusiastic fan of that particular wine, then began a major export of Marsala wine to Britain, and the use of Marsala wine for the purposes of giving the sailors, usually on a daily basis, a ration, if you will, in this case of Marsala wine. And those are the kind of tidbits, if you will, that I try to bring to the story. Wherever possible, I try to connect where we are going or where we're about to go, etc., to the United States, because it makes then the connection to wherever we're going much more personal, I guess. And in the case of Sicily, we all know, if for no other reason, that I think 90% of people either know about or have seen the movie, The Godfather. Well, that summons an important question. Why the migration from Italy in the first place? And then secondly, what are the sources of that migration, and in what ways does it impact on the United States? And northern Italy, most people in the case of most tourists and so on, aren't aware that the Piedmonte was one of the initial sources of migration to the United States, including here to California, I might add, but also a bit later, for reasons that, again, if people go on the trip, I'll be able to discuss at greater length. Then we have southern Italy become a major source of migration, so that the Sicilian view of migration, think Martin Scorsese, for example, all right, has a particular history that is different from the Piedmonte, for example, of Italy. So I try to bring those aspects into the story, including, and again, this is not intended to be a plug in a sense for my wine course, but including the fact that the market of Italians in New York, because of that huge migration in the latter part of the 19th century, meant that winemakers here in California, especially once the railroad was completed, then sent tons and tons of wine to the Northeast and upper Midwest, think Chicago, because the market there was so great, in part because of the Italian population. So those are the things I try to bring into the story. Not, again, not just the obvious, but particular stories. And in the case of Sicily, of course, I'm going to bring in some historical issues regarding World War II and the entry of the United States into Sicily, into southern Italy in particular, and what that meant for the United States and what it meant for Italy. So at the risk of going too long in that particular question, Nancy, I want people to understand how myself, and I'm sure my colleagues who are enrichment lecturers and on other trips, we try to get beyond those aspects that are going to be in every guidebook, if you will, to bring a different perspective, another dimension, and a deeper way of understanding the places that we're going to on these trips.
Well, thanks. I don't know about our viewers, but for me, you're sharing your tidbits, as you call them, the gold nuggets. That translates into a very strong educational component that you cannot find anywhere else. So I really appreciate you going into that for us today, just so that our travelers will have an idea as to the actually the extent to which you and our other professors and lecturers go to make sure that these kinds of trips, our Cal Discoveries trips, really go beyond just, you know, a Fodor's travel book or something that you would just find on a usual ordinary trip. I know you've been on quite a few trips with us. Can you tell us about one of your most unexpected, humorous, and or memorable experiences on a Cal Discoveries trip?
Well, there are so many, Nancy.
I know it's hard to choose one.
Just one is difficult, but I'll mention one because it's a little more dramatic. And again, in my talks, I just don't bring, in a sense, the bright, sunshiny elements of the tour, but occasionally we run into something that really gets to the heart, if you will, and soul in some cases of the dimension that I try to bring to these tours. And in that respect, I think one of my most memorable trips was the one where we did to Catalonia, to the Catalan area. And there, as some people may know, the last bastion of resistance to the imposition of the Franco dictatorship in Spain was in Barcelona. And it gives me a chance to discuss the American volunteers who went to Spain in order to fight against the fascist forces of Francisco Franco, which led, of course, to a number of consequences, not the least of which a great book by Ernest Hemingway, and the whole role of Hemingway and others, including his love at the time, Miss Gellhorn. But we went to a site of a battle involving the Spanish, during the period of the Spanish Civil War. And I had not been there before. I had been to other sites, but not that particular one. It was a small town on top of a hill near the river Ebro. And it really brought to light, because it's a living monument. It hasn't been touched since the end of the war. So the buildings and the destruction of most of the buildings are almost exactly as they were at the end of that particular battle. And it allowed me the opportunity to discuss how, in many respects, the Spanish Civil War was a prelude to World War II. The Spanish Civil War meant that the United States, along with France and Britain, and two countries that were directly involved, Italy and Germany, signed a pact agreement of neutrality, but they violated it brazenly and openly, including the bombing of Guernica, which is immortalized in the famous painting by Picasso. So allowed me a chance to discuss why did the United States turn its back, and France and Britain, to what was obvious. What determined the foreign policy of the United States of that time, and why? Why did Franklin Delano Roosevelt try clandestinely to support the forces against Franco and so on, but found it almost impossible to get into Spain itself in order to deliver those military arms and so on that he had hoped would be able to reach, quote unquote, the Republican side, that is the Spanish Republican side, as opposed to the forces of Franco. So for me, that was an emotional visit, educational for me, but I think every one of the people that was on that trip with me, I think, came away with a sobering experience, but also an experience that really helped us understand one of the key sources of the Second World War.
Excellent. So in this particular example, the historical significance of where you visited made a huge impact, not only on you, but on the travelers as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I know this happens, like you said, it's hard to choose just one because it happens more than once. And this is pretty typical of the other lecturers that I have interviewed when I asked that question. You've talked a little bit, Alex, about sort of what goes into preparing for your lectures and discussions and whatnot. But for you personally, what learning experiences have you gained from being a Cal Discoveries Eureka lecturer?
Well, the course that I taught with Richard Herr, for example, in the history department, and a couple of other folks, when we were doing the world history course there at Cal for undergraduates, it was eye-opening for me, and I enjoyed just going to the lectures of my colleagues because it opened up all these little windows, if you will, in terms of my own understanding of historical events and forces and the like. And as a consequence of that, it made the international dimension, for lack of a better term, of the courses that I was teaching to be able to understand more deeply, for example, the impact of sugar on the European diet, just to make an example in the case of Cuba, or to understand why in 1829, Spain decided to try one last attempt to retake Mexico and make it part of of Spain once again, and how it failed. But also the case that despite the Monroe Doctrine, the United States did not get involved. The Monroe Doctrine occurred in 1821, etc. And that leads to all these little arteries of knowledge that, when you put them all together, adds a certain dimension, let us say, to the stories that I'm able to tell on these trips. And in the case of Sicily, another tidbit.
Oh, fabulous.
Procopio Cotelli.
Well,
okay. Why would anyone know about Procopio Cotelli unless you absolutely love going to a cafe in Saint-Germain-des-Prés in Paris and sit there and then open up my handout that I might give out to folks if we were visiting Paris and so on. And this is the cafe that started the coffee house trend in Paris in 1686. And the guy who did that was a Sicilian by the name of Procopio Cotelli, which immediately goes to the question, what the heck was a Sicilian doing in Paris selling coffee, sort of thing. And those are again, an example of how because coffee was a major export of Cuba. So as you begin to do deeper and deeper research and the consumption of coffee in Europe and how that had an impact on Cuba, you run across these stories. And this is a beautiful story because that cafe, you can still go and get a cup of coffee at this cafe on a side street to Saint-Germain-des-Prés in Paris. So you can imagine my glee when I was a visiting professor at the Sorbonne to actually go to that cafe, sort of thing. And my research and teaching has allowed me, if you will, to put my finger in a lot of pies and empanadas and pastries or whatever it is, metaphor you want to use, that allows me to enrich not only my teaching and often my own research, but also I think brings again a strata of knowledge and stories that enhance, I would hope, in the best of circumstances, and usually my evaluations seem to indicate that this is the case, these stories that bring another element to the trips, to the visits, and often a kind of knowledge that deepens the experience of being in a particular place.
Well, certainly your enthusiasm is contagious, at least for me. And I'm hoping that our travelers also will receive that same enthusiasm for not only your thirst for knowledge, but finding and discovering those tidbits, as you call them, to share with our travelers along the way. I know, Alex, we had communicated just, I think, this week, and you had already mentioned that you were doing research for the trip to Sicily, which is not happening until September of 2021.
Right.
So can you just briefly tell us a little bit about what goes into, I mean, you've explained some of it, but a little bit about what goes into choosing your topics and your lectures?
Sure. And that's part of the research. And part of the research is going through travel books and seeing what they are doing in the obvious, knowing that probably 98% of the people who will go on the trip will buy a book from the major publishers. We all know who they are: Eyewitness, Lonely Planet, Frommer's, Rick Steves, whatever. And I need to know what is likely to be the level of knowledge of the people who will be traveling with me, at least based on what's in the guidebook. And that then I ask myself, what can I bring to the story, if you will, of this tour? What is it that I can discuss that is going to be distinctive, that's not going to be mentioned in any substantive way in the guidebooks and so on. So that's my starting point. And then I tried to marry, if you will, the itinerary to a set of topics that to me, I think are important to consider. In the case of Sicily, there is no way that I can, in a sense, avoid the topic of the different invasions that Sicily has been subjected to since time immemorial, at least since the time of the Phoenicians. And what does that mean for that part of Italy as opposed to other parts of Italy? And most of my students, for example, just assume Italy was always there, but it's not. It was one of the latecomers, in a sense, to nationhood in 1861. And one of the debates, and this is something that which most of the guidebooks really don't discuss in any kind of substantive way, there was a big debate at the time of Italian unification whether to even include the southern part of Italy because of the perception, too often, unfortunately, negative one, of the people in the north and central part of what we now call Italy toward the people of the south, particularly Sicily and the Sicilians. So immediately then for me, I'm going to talk about that and how that reflects itself in various ways in Italy, southern Italy, and Sicily in particular. And then I try to marry that in turn to the specific sites that we're going to visit. And
okay,
then,
so pardon me for interrupting. Can you tell us, are we talking then several months of research and preparation, correct?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, as I said, I go deep. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm spouting statistics and names and dates and so on, but I go deep in the sense of using that data, whatever the nature of that data might be, statistical or otherwise, to tell a story. And I'm always looking for stories like the romance between Lord Nelson and Emma Hamilton, to connect that story, not only in the relationship of Nelson and Emma Hamilton to what happens when he goes back and the gossip begins to fly all over London and so on, but what that means in terms of the importation of Italian wine, for example, to London. And John Woodhouse, an Englishman of all things, is the first one to send a large shipment of wine from Sicily to London. So I tried to tell those stories in such a way that when you walk away from a particular winery, let us say in Sicily, as is likely to be the case in our trip, you're not only going to be able to talk about the wonderful X wine that you had and so on, but be able to also talk about how and why in this particular part of Sicily, this particular dish you cannot find in another part of Italy because of the history of that particular part of the island.
Excellent,
That makes
excellent.
any sense.
I really want to thank you so much, Alex, for such a genuine interview, allowing us to get a much deeper understanding about our Eureka trips in general. And I would like our travelers to know that after each one of our trips, we send out evaluations, and you are very correct. Our travelers give you rave reviews.
Wow.
For across the board, and they really, really have appreciated the historical storytelling, I will say it that way because it's true, how it relates to where you are, history, the United States, so on and so forth. So thank you so much for helping us to really understand our Eureka programs. And I'd like our viewers today to know that Alex is scheduled to lecture on the Eureka Taste of Sicily Wine Tour from September 11th to the 19th of next year, 2021. And we hope the interview has brought you into the diverse and spectacular educational world of Cal Discoveries travel. Please visit our website, alumni.berkeley.edu/travel, where you can see our amazing 2021 program lineup. Thanks for joining us today, and go Bears!
Go Bears!